Well, hey, real quick, I'll edit this out. So, what is the official name of your company again?
Construction consulting.
Just
Dot co
construction
is
consulting.
the
Okay,
yeah is the legal name, but construction consulting is fine. Yeah.
gotcha. Okay, all right. So we'll start at the 20 here.
Hmm.
All right. Well, hey everyone, thank you so much for watching the Remodeling Success podcast today. My name is Brooks Burnett, the host of the Remodeling Success podcast. I'm very excited today. We have a a construction coach here with us, and I'm very excited to have him on. His name's Bryan Kaplan, owner of Construction Consulting, and happy to have him on to give his insights about the industry, about what's going on, what he sees in the industry, and with remodelers. And so I'm happy for you to be here, Bryan.
Awesome. Thanks so much for having me, Brooks.
So let's just dive right in and get started. Tell us a little bit about how you got involved in the industry. Where'd you start? Where are you today? Kind of just give us the lay of the land of you and your company here.
For sure. So, like many people that are in the industry, we tend to fall into it. And we bought a house back in 1999 that I started renovating with my father in law. And I'll be honest that neither of us had really had a clue of what we were doing, but I kind of had a good sort of feel for it and something that I was really interested in and really enjoyed building. Kind of the typical story of, having a ton of Lego when I was 3 years old, building houses on a Lego board. So, basically kind of fell into it. That was the early part of it. Worked for a few companies and then started my own, and certainly learned a lot in that early 2000s before there was any podcasts or any YouTube or any sort of information sharing other than reading Michael Stone's book, Markup and Profit, which if you haven't read it is a great book to go and read. It's kind of largely considered one of the best construction books around finances. Just a little plug for him. And but basically kind of did that for about 8 or 9 years, and then I transitioned to working to remodeling companies, custom home building companies, trending more towards a larger scale type of project. So, anything from $500,000 up, but typically around $1 to $1.5 million type of full rebuilds, and custom homes as well. So, and then in 2018, I was working as a general manager of a green building company in Toronto. I'm from Toronto, Canada. And kind of really had no reason to kind of change or pivot or anything like that. But I've been watching the coaching space for a while. I'd been getting a ton of, calls and emails and, just, questions from other companies in the industry in Toronto asking me how we're charging for pre-construction. How are we estimating jobs? How are we growing a team to 22 people? How are we doing all of this? And I started mentoring our internal teams as well on project management. Every Wednesdays at 5 o'clock, everyone could come and join, and kind of had created a curriculum and realized that what I was doing was no different than what a lot of coaches already existing in the space were doing. I think one of the big differences for me was that I had physically done it all. And, I am a Red Seal certified carpenter, had, actually built businesses, been a PM, been a general manager of a company and scaled it. So realized that I had a lot to offer, and it was kind of maybe time for a change. And I've kind of always looked for the next challenge in life, so kind of pivoted to the coaching model.
Well, awesome. I mean, it sounds like you have a ton of experience from in all aspects of
Hmm.
remodeling and the construction. Being an owner yourself, starting
Hmm.
starting from the ground up, and then getting more into the coaching. You it seems like you really have a good understanding, uh, more so than anyone I've ever spoken with of the industry. So,
Hmm.
so what exactly do you offer your clients today? What
Hmm.
kind of services do you provide for them?
Yeah. So, like most people that get into consulting or coaching, you tend to start with a one-on-one approach. So, I started working with companies one-on-one all across Canada as well as throughout the US. And we different formats, of course, as the years have progressed. We're now 5.5 years in, so our coaching program probably looks a little bit different than it did when we first started. But effectively, we would go through, if anyone's familiar with the EOS system, the entrepreneur operating system, or any of the other frameworks that exist out there from a business standpoint, to be honest with you, they're all pretty much the same. They're just labeled, they've got different labels, and the way that they're kind of shared is a little bit different. But you've got the people, you've got the data, you've got the systems, you've got the financials, you've got obviously the estimating and all that kind of stuff. And so we kind of really touch on all of those components. And I'd say the first couple of years was really formative for me because I was successful in the construction industry, both in physically building, but as well as running companies and scaling them transitioning into a model of how you help somebody do that is something that's actually a learned skill. And that took me a couple of years to really figure out. And so at that point, I kind of started, dabbling in doing group coaching. So I did an estimating masterclass, a sales masterclass, and a know your numbers program. And so these were kind of three programs that really covered the core of, I think, what you really need to be successful in this industry. There were a few things outside of those, but as well, there was a lot of things inside of those that I kind of started to look at and say, well, what is the most important stuff here that's really going to drive success? And so after thousands of hours of one-on-one coaching, you start to really glean insight into like what is actually, driving success for these companies. And so I kind of created what I call the build and profit system, which is a new program, which kind of combines, the three of those, as well as a few pieces that were outside of that program, including kind of recruiting and team development and all of that, which was something that I spent a lot of time doing when I built a team of 22 people. And so this program is like pretty comprehensive in terms of like, this is kind of like the blueprint. You can call it an operating system, you can call it whatever you want, but it's basically, for me, kind of the blueprint of how I drove success to multiple, high 7-figure company scale, and, and maintaining our gross profit throughout that. So we now run the program. We still offer one-on-one coaching. We've been capped at that for quite a while. We've got a long sort of like veteran roster of clients, I would say. And then something very exciting is we actually spent the past year building our own internal software that'll be coming to market probably later this summer. So we're currently in our closed beta testing, which is very exciting. Really solving some of these financial problems that I'm sure we'll dig into a little bit today.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's good. Providing, personalized consulting for each contractor, and starting with that one-on-one approach, I guess has helped you to kind of realize, maybe there are some consistencies between remodelers. There's some common, some common sticking points, if you will. And so that's great. So when it comes to finding that contractor that needs some help, what kind of sticks out to you when it comes to, finding those remodelers? Is it, just startups, or is it, people who've been in the game for a long time, but, they're kind of at a plateau? How do you kind of find the best contractor for your business?
Yeah. I mean, I think when, like anybody, when you start a company, the door's open and everyone can come in. It's like, come on in, we're open for business. We'll take anybody and everybody, right? And then, of course, as you have experiences, you realize this is no different for any remodeler listening to this, where you start with doing like a fence or a backyard or a bathroom, and then a basement, and then a kitchen. And then, you discover obviously the clients that aren't the right fit for you, the ones that want to supply all the materials themselves, and they just want you to charge for labor. And then they decide that they're going to continue to cut out scope, or, all of these things that that are red flags now as you get more experience. And so same sort of thing happened for me, is to, at the beginning, again, it was kind of come on in. Obviously, there's a challenge when we talk about startups. The challenge is that they have limited resources, not just money, but also time. Time being the more important one, because the money they will find if they feel like the solution is there and that they can actually get their desired result. But if they don't have the time to implement, then you're kind of wasting your time in a lot of respects. And so I think there's other coaching programs out there that tend to filter startups out of their programs, because they recognize that, like, until you kind of get to the 750, a million scale, really a million is kind of that threshold. At that point, you tend to have a couple of people on site, and you tend to have some administrative help. So you actually have the capacity, or maybe the chance of capacity, to actually go through a coaching program, take action, implement, because you also have other resources, like human resources, that you can sort of press on to help you implement certain things, like administrative tasks, if you will. So I think for me, I started to realize that. But, in saying all of this, I have a lot of people that it's in the startup phase, so the sub 1 million, that are finding great success in our program. Their implementation, yeah, it's tough. It's very tricky, but I've adapted how I deliver my coaching program to really try and match that reality. And then on the other side, I've got people that have been in the business for 35 years that are in the program, that are doing, 5 and 10 million and even more sometimes. And they find a lot of value in it. It's not like I'm necessarily probably teaching them anything brand new, but my perspective and the way that I talk about it and the way that I encourage them to kind of rethink about their business is often very helpful. So there's something for everybody when it comes to that sort of thing. In terms of the one-on-one coaching, what I also started to realize was, and part of the why I think most coaches will, you naturally move towards what I call like a systems thinking perspective, which is, sure, I can go through all of this every single time with every single new business that I start with, or I could record it all, have them go through it, work with them to implement it. And then when they're done that, then bring them on as a one-on-one client. Because from a process standpoint, if you're just one person running a business, it's really hard. We all have 168 hours in the week. No one is exempt from that rule. And so how you use them is obviously very important. And so productizing that knowledge is really helpful, gets everybody on the same page. And at that point, if they want to become a one-on-one client, we're speaking the same language. We've implemented maybe not all of it, but a lot of the things that we're going to work on one-on-one. And we can actually really get further a lot quicker in the one-on-one approach at that stage.
So kind of,
I didn't really answer your question, I don't think, but it was kind of more of a broad overscope.
no, you're good. You're good. And so I really like that approach of kind of bringing everyone to a certain level before bringing them on to the one-on-one coaching. So, if they're not quite there yet, still giving them resources to get to that point, but maybe not, bringing them on as like you said, like just a direct one-on-one coaching client. So that way, everyone's kind of at the same level or so, somewhere around there when you bring them on. So is that kind of the idea you're going for?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, even on the other side, if there's any coaches that listen to this or people that are thinking of getting into coaching, the other side of it is it's kind of a bit of a litmus test for you as well. Before I dedicate myself for 12 months to working with a company, I want to know that they're actually going to implement and dedicate themselves. And so my input on the coaching program side, I should say, the Build and Profit system, is less than having a recurring standing appointment every other week with my one-on-one clients and all the deliverables that come along with that. So it's kind of a nice litmus test for me to see how motivated they really are, because when I'm on a sales call, every remodeler will say to me, if I'm going to commit, I'm 100% in. And somehow they believe that, but the result isn't always the same, right? And I get it. We have so many things competing for our time, and a lot of us sit in firefighting mode on a daily basis. And so that tends to take the place of the commitment that you made a few weeks before. So again, it's just kind of a nice litmus test, but bring everybody to a certain level, at least of exposure. Even if they haven't implemented everything, they understand what we're going to be working on, and we've just got a nice head start.
So when it comes to the remodelers that you're working with, they've come to that similar position, ready to bring them on as one-on-one coaching clients. What are some of the most common sticking points for remodelers? Like, say they want to scale. Is it, I know it's going to be different for everyone, but like you're saying, there might be some more commonalities than we might initially realize. So what are some of those sticking points that you see kind of across the board for your remodeling clients?
Yeah, I would put a precursor on this whole thing and say that, what was really interesting is when I did the coaching, like the group coaching, we'd have like 30 companies from across the country basically on these calls. And the topic was estimating, let's just say, like they all had the same problem. Like it wasn't like, my clients in Delaware and Washington, had different problems, sort of, it was the same thing, estimating takes too long. It's really hard to be accurate. If I'm not charging for pre-construction, I've got a lot of like mind goblins about like charging for pre-construction. So how do I do that? Because no one's going to do that. No one's doing that around here. So how do I charge for it? Like it was all the same sort of stuff. And so I think that that's just like as a high level, doesn't really matter where you are in the country. Everyone feels your pain, and if you don't believe me, just go onto Instagram and, even check out my account and watch, some of the topics I talk about and see and go check where these people are. They're all in different parts of the country. So, so the question is, what are some common things? And I'm going to also kind of give a very high level overview of something. We just wrote a great article about this, and it's just a kind of a process of a way of thinking about your business and really anything in life when it comes to problem solving. I used to say that being a great carpenter is 50% of doing the work and 50% of knowing where you're going. And the knowing where you're going is being able to troubleshoot and problem solve. And that's still true. But as a business owner, one of the biggest challenges that I find that remodeling companies, really any small, even to medium-sized enterprise has, is that we tend to focus on reacting to downstream problems as opposed to focusing on upstream solutions and really looking at kind of that relationship between cause and effect. So an example might be that, one of the common pain points is financials. I don't have, job costing for my projects. I don't know where I'm at on a job. My invoicing is behind because we're missing receipts. My bookkeeper can't finish that job costing because they're missing receipts, or there's stuff that's incorrectly coded, or I have the stack of stuff that's on my desk that I have to code because nobody else is doing it, sort of thing. And so the financial piece is a real challenge. So that's all downstream, right? It's downstream in that these things are happening on a daily basis. Your team is tracking time. They're purchasing things at point of purchase. There's trade partners sending in invoices, and they're probably going to the wrong person. They're not going to the person, or the person that's closely related to the task. So let's say that you have a medium-sized construction business and you have a project manager who's running a project. That project manager should be the one that's actually coding all of that at source where it happens, and then passing along to the bookkeeper. And what tends to happen in a lot of companies is that there's a bookkeeping, admin at yourgreatcompany.com email account that they work out of, and everything's coming there. The problem is there might be project information missing. There certainly isn't cross coding on it. And, the bookkeeper also doesn't know, is this approved for payment? Has the work been completed, et cetera, et cetera. So that's a very, simple example to talk about the difference between what I call downstream and upstream. And my best advice to anybody listening to this is every single problem that you have, ask yourself the question, what could I do upstream in this process, no matter what topic or section of the business that it is, whether it's sales, marketing, financials, execution, operations, whatever. What can I do upstream in that process to prevent that downstream problem? Because the second part that we see here is firefighting, that constant daily firefighting thing. I have a bunch of tasks planned for today, and then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, this like sandstorm. I'm not going to use cursive language on your podcast, but the sandstorm, comes out of nowhere, right? And you just get swept up into it. And before you turn around, you haven't eaten lunch. It's 3:00, and then maybe you get back to your office. Maybe your office is your basement in your house, or your dining room table or whatever, or an actual office, and you're just spent. And there's just like no way you can actually do anything. So you sit on your email box for a little while, do some stuff, and then the day is basically over, and you got nothing done. And then it's Groundhog Day the next day, sort of thing. And the same sort of thing happens. And that's all caused by the upstream downstream connection, the cause and effect. So this is something that I think everyone would resonate with, hearing about the firefighting, feeling like I can't do that. Something else connected to this is the people part of their business. And I think there's a lot of chatter in the industry. It's, people say like today it's really hard to find a great superintendent, great project manager, even a great lead carpenter or carpenter, on site. And I'm not here to say that that's not a reality, but I am here to say that I started in 1999 and it was the same problem back then. It never really changed. It's just more visible today, I think. And I also think that, what's happened is that obviously the industry has grown, right? Population has grown. Houses have gotten 20 years older in the time that I've been in this industry. And so we're at a stage now where, there is a real shortage, especially in large cities where, affordability is a problem. So we have a lot of, cities that we work in, large cities, Seattle, Vancouver, Los Angeles, New York, Austin, Texas, Miami, Florida. These are expensive places to live. And so carpenters making $20 to $25 an hour can't live in these cities anymore. So that has also contributed to, a challenge with, manpower in actually physically getting stuff done. But bigger than this, and one of the things that we always talk about is like team development is the kind of thing that gets put on the back shelf. When I was a carpenter, your kind of onboarding was, hey, this is the address, go, be there for 8:00 and ask for Matt. That was basically your onboarding. And I'd say that it's probably still pretty common in today's world, in today's construction industry, that that's what is kind of happening. And have people come out for a day or two and see how they work and see if it makes sense and all of that sort of thing. Again, it's a very downstream approach because I don't really know who the person is. I don't really know what their skill level is. Sure, I can watch them work for a day or two. And anybody listening to this, I would echo and say that I could watch somebody for, a couple of hours, really honestly, like about 30 minutes and kind of get a sense of where they were at. But it didn't really, help me understand if they were going to be a good long-term fit. And so slowing down your recruiting process, taking the right steps in that process is more of an upstream focus to make sure you're getting the right person into your construction business. And then the big thing I would tell you is that the moment that you hire somebody, they show up, they start performing work and all of that, that's not the moment when your onboarding is done. That's where it's starting. And, what I tend to tell people is like the mentorship thing never really ends. You're always kind of like mentoring your teams, always kind of moving them through, not necessarily if they want to grow into the next level of your company or the next level in their own career. But that mindset is really important, I think, as a business owner, because I think a lot of us are really probably good managers, um, bordering on micromanagers, but not very good leaders. And that's kind of the difference. And it's something I learned as a general manager. It took me 3 years to figure this out. And I have some crazy stories about that, about what actually happened to me that helped me figure this out. But it took me about 3 years to really recognize the difference between my micromanaging approach versus what leading really meant and how I was actually going to grow a company to a couple dozen people and keep our gross profit up while we're doubling our revenue. So these are a few things, of course. These are granular, but also connected to that upstream, downstream. And, the other big one I would say is, knowing your numbers. And that has a plethora of applications. But the big thing being, of course, how am I pricing jobs? Do I really understand what margin I need in my business? Do I understand anything to do with my QuickBooks? And I always ask people on a call, like between 1 and 10, where's your kind of level of comfortability with your QuickBooks income statement? And invariably I get 5 or lower from the majority of the calls that I do. And I think it's such an important part of it. If you go to trade school, that you don't get taught this. Even in our public schools today, I mean, they're starting to teach some financial awareness. Thank goodness, like that's happening for the next generations. But, when I went to school, like there was nothing. If I took economics, it was, I'd learn a little bit, but even just basic stuff about how credit works and all these sorts of things, like none of us get taught this. And, similarly, you don't get taught how to run a business when you go to trade school. You really effectively just, learn how to do the trade, and the business is kind of like this thing on the side sort of thing. So understanding your numbers, understanding, what margin you really need, how to price your work properly, ensuring that you understand both pricing models out there, fixed cost and cost plus, which one works for you, which one doesn't work for you, et cetera, et cetera. That's a huge one that, of course, is a big challenge for sure.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So remodeling, I've said in the past is, as you know, it's different than,
Mm-hmm.
from what I've seen, almost every other home service, right?
Mm-hmm.
Remodeling, because it encompasses all of the other, or most of the other home services around, right? Because they're hiring painters, they have some subcontractors to do the plumbing most of the
Mm-hmm.
time, right? They've got,
Mm-hmm.
and so there's so much baggage that our remodelers have, and they've got so much on their plates. I could see how easily it could really get out of hand, and
Mm-hmm.
could just go crazy, go awry for the remodelers. Is that something
Yeah.
that you're seeing a pretty good bit of?
Oh yeah, I mean, I do. We also work with like specialty trade partners like plumbers, electricians, et cetera, et cetera. I do have several companies that are in that discipline. I mean, my main experience is on the remodeling, large scale
Mm-hmm.
renovation, and custom home building side. But of course, in saying that and kind of dovetailing from what you're talking about is like we were always connected to all of our trade partners, right? Without them, we couldn't build these houses. Like it was physically impossible for us because the
Mm-hmm.
industry changed a lot. 30, 35 years ago, there was a lot more self-performing happening on larger scale projects. And, the way the world works is it just kind of like specializes and keeps drilling down in that sort of way. Simple example is that, you used to have boardmen, that were tape as well. So like you throw up sheetrock or drywall, depending on what part of the country you're in. And then you'd also tape it sort of thing. And now, when I basically got into the industry, it was pretty much at the tail end of that, where it was always boardmen and tapers. It was always kind of a separate thing. So same sort of example, it used to be the same thing. Plumbers used to select the plumbing fixtures for your projects, right? Now it's an entire experience. It's like a totally different world. So,
Mm-hmm.
but yeah, I
Mm-hmm.
mean, so it's kind of like because of that specialization, because of the number of options, and then, you mix in this whole digital information age, the task of like, let's just say building a custom house and all the finishes that come along with this, the number of people that you have involved now, the number of options, and then the amount of traffic that you have to deal with, information coming and going, we use whatever software we use for this, and we use this for that, and we have spreadsheets for this. And I mean, just the amount of tasks. I always say this, like, and I don't know if this is really true. Maybe people that have insight outside of our industry can either agree or disagree with me, but like, I feel like construction is kind of unique in that we just have like whatever a typical business has, it's like 10x in construction in terms of traffic that we have to deal with. Whether it's, again, emails coming in, requests, from a vendor, or like purchasing something, or like dealing with stuff on site. I just feel like there's so much more in construction. And so that creates that kind of like hamster wheel, that kind of like Groundhog Day, that just like, and it gets to a point, and it's when a lot of people come to me and they're like, either they're in the startup phase and they're really, kind of taking the approach of, I'd rather learn from someone who's been there, or it's people that have been in the industry for like 15, 20 years. And are like, I'm just so tired of it. I resent my business, and I resent getting up each day. I resent, my clients. I resent like all of this stuff. And it's an unfairly assigned resentment if it's like clients. I mean, some clients you can resent. Right. It's okay. But I certainly, there's been a handful, but generally speaking, it's usually because, they are very focused on downstream stuff. They're in this hamster wheel, and it just becomes too much at a certain point, for sure.
Right. So you mentioned a little bit about technology, and so how do you recommend, your clients incorporate technology? Is it, slowly, piece by piece, or do y'all kind of have your own, recommended software for like you mentioned, QuickBooks, and for estimating and different things like that? How do you incorporate, or recommend rather, your contractors incorporate technology?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think the first thing I'll tell you is that the best system is the one that you'll use. And so while there are a plethora of options out there, from construction management solutions to fintech or financial technology solutions, I think the biggest thing is really just kind of, for me, my approach is I look at kind of what they're doing right now. And while I might have a strong opinion about certain technologies being, very good at certain things, I'm not there to kind of say, you need to use this and do this. The exemption would be when you're managing all of your like compliance level accounting in a spreadsheet. I get you into QuickBooks, because you just need a proper accounting platform. I mean, I don't have to really dive too deep into that, but like, you just absolutely need it for keep the government happy, keep yourself, knowledgeable about where your business is going, and there's certain functions that you need. So I think that's kind of an important thing to recognize is, first, what is the best system that we can use? Obviously, if everyone's, very analog and paper based, we have to get digital. We have to get into that digital threshold, because you are getting left behind, and you're also just doing a lot of work that's like, siloed and not shareable, and it just really slows you down. The other big part about this that most people don't really think about, I mean, they do if they've experienced, let's just say that they use one of like the big project management softwares out there. They'll usually say this line to me if they have. If they haven't, they won't. But I always say, like, who is actually going to do the work? And that's kind of a really important part of this, because we could have the best project management solution out there, but if someone's not dedicated to kind of working into it, or if that's being shared across your team, which obviously a lot of the functions like doing, a daily, field report and tracking your time, and like there's things that are obviously shared by every team member in the company, then you're really going to struggle, A, with adoption, but B, with getting the result that you're looking for, which is, hey, I want all the stuff in one place. I want a dedicated prescribed system for how we manage every single component of the business. But if you can't really solve that who, or you don't have the who that's going to do it, then you're not really ever going to get that result. That's kind of going to be what the challenges is, or are. And I should say that most people that use a comprehensive project management solution will say to me on average that we use about 25 to 30% of it. We don't use it to its fullest capacity. Even those words that I just used, I can't tell you how many times people have said those exact words to me. And I was no different. I used one of the big project management softwares out there for 4.5 years. We used probably about 30% of it. We didn't use the financial piece. One, because we were cost plus. Two, because it didn't do tax. And so it was pretty much useless to us in that regard. And we had our own system and we managed it that way. So I think that's really key. Another key thing about adoption is, I think a lot of people think I have to go to the most comprehensive solution first. And I think there's nothing wrong with going with smaller solutions, even if it's a couple of them, and kind of working yourself up and getting some adoption across your team, and then maybe going to a consolidated approach later on. I think that's kind of one of these things that people think I need to go to the biggest one first. And the challenge with that is that the learning curve is really large. Going to a
Mm.
comprehensive project management solution, it's going to take you minimum of 6 months to feel like you're actually using components of it properly. That's just the reality of
Right.
the tools that are on the market right now. And so, and what I see, I've done over 4,000 one-on-one
Mm.
coaching hours. I have dozens of logins for all different project management software solutions, including all the new ones that kind of spring up every day that I see.
Mm.
And same thing, same problem sort of thing. So last thing I'll say on this with adoption is, try to find the players in your company that have an affiliation or kind of propensity towards or affinity towards technology. Get them to be your early ambassadors in your company, because the people that are beside them in your organizational chart, let's just say I'm a carpenter or I'm a lead or I'm a super, the people beside me that hold the same position, if I see my colleague using it and succeeding with it, I'm going to be more attuned to listening and being open to actually using it and helping the business as a whole, because I'm seeing somebody that's beside me, not the big boss, saying, "Hey, you have to use this. This is what we're doing," sort of thing. Where it becomes very administrative, and directive. This is more of like, "Hey, let me show you how we're using this and how this works." And as soon as you can see some value in that, that's a very powerful thing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, like you mentioned, there's probably at this point thousands of CRMs and
Mm-hmm.
potential assistance with all of these steps, right? With
Mm-hmm.
you could probably break it down to every single need that contractors have and find a software or hundreds of them for each one,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
so and it's really like you said, it's just finding the one you're comfortable with and just sticking with it and making sure that it's doing everything you're utilizing it to the best of your and its ability, right? That's like
Mm-hmm.
with my business, if we have a contractor that's using a CRM that they're used to and they enjoy, stick
Mm-hmm.
with it. Like, I'm not here to, get you mad at me for the next, like you said, next 6 months while you're trying to figure it out.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
just find what you like and stick with it. Right. And so,
Yeah.
so good. Well, anything else about technology? I know it's like you said, it's especially with like AI coming up and all of
Mm-hmm.
these different possibilities and shiny objects. I get that a lot, a lot of
Yeah.
clients saying, "Hey, what about this? Hey, what about that?" And I have to,
Yeah.
shoot them down almost every time. So do you, what do you think about the current state of the industry in terms of
Mm-hmm.
technology? What are your thoughts on
Yeah.
that?
I mean, I think high level, it's still very early, even though there are, thousands, if not at least hundreds for sure in each discipline. But I think it's still very early. I think the rate of adoption is probably still sub 10% in our industry. Just from like a overall perspective of maybe a larger scale CRM slash, project management solution. Something you said in there, I was already thinking, and this is what I wanted to add in, was that I think a lot of business owners are really worried about like not being on the biggest platform or feeling like I'm going to grow out of this smaller tool that I'm using. And it's such a interesting psychological thing. It's tied to something called loss aversion, where the loss of something is greater than the gain that you can gain from something. And we're so worried. It's why sales work so well, because we're worried about losing the opportunity to purchase at a lower price. We're not actually thinking about the thing that we're purchasing. That's often what kind of happens there. And so I would tell people, like, don't be so concerned about growing out of a tool, because probably what's going to end up happening, if the tool is really good, and it's going to grow also, and they're going to probably add additional features that are tailored to the solution you're currently using. And so just don't be afraid to kind of like stick with something because you really feel like it's too small or doesn't do every single component that you want to do. Because on the flip side, most people aren't ready for the bigger comprehensive solution, the 6 months, the 30% usage, all of that sort of thing. And the price tag that's associated with those tends to be something which is also ironic, which I'll add in here. Most builders will go to the store and buy a new Festool domino kit for $600-700 or whatever, but they'll, balk at $300 or $400 a month for their CRM program that helps them organize their
Hmm.
business. So I always found that kind of interesting to me. I'm not saying I'm like not affected by that either. If I think about that in my own business, I have tons of stuff that I pay software as a service for. That
Hmm.
said, I do recognize the value, and just think it's kind of funny. So next time you guys are looking at your credit card statement and you see that line item for that PM solution you're using, and it says $3.99 or $4.99 or $5.99 or whatever, just ask yourself how many tools you bought this month. Because they're no different. One tool helps you cut wood, the other tool helps you organize, the client files and the finances and all of that kind of thing. Last point is AI. Yeah, AI obviously is a big topic. The other thing I would say to people is don't be so concerned about like I'm getting left behind because this whole world's going to AI, because it's still so early. I mean, AI has actually been around for a very long time. It's just that it became more of like a buzz thing recently, and OpenAI, of course, Chat GPT and all this kind of thing. So,
Hmm.
but it's been around for years, and it's only going to continue to advance and grow and all of that. And what's going to end up happening, like right now, AI is a very self-service type of thing. You have to actually go and use it yourself, as opposed to like it being fully automated, so to speak. Um, Over time, what's going to happen is it's actually going to become more and more integrated into all the technology. So the developers and like people running these software companies, they're going to do the work almost for you in a sense, is kind of what my opinion is. It's like, don't be so worried that you're not on the AI train, because it's going to just continue to show up. Like pretty much every software you go into now has like a little AI thing. It's like, hey, you should use this sort of thing,
Hmm.
AI writer,
Hmm.
or, et cetera, et cetera. And eventually that's just going to become more and more like available within every software you're using. And it's really just going to kind of blend into our regular lives. So don't be too afraid to use the smaller solution because you're going to outgrow it. Don't be super, feel like you're behind because you're not really using AI. Use it when it's reasonable for you to do it, is really the reality.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, it's again, it's just in my opinion, it's a lot of shiny object syndrome.
Hmm.
It's like, is AI really going to help you? You know, with whatever it is you're interested in it helping you with.
Hmm.
Like most of the time, no, probably not.
Hmm.
Right? It's
Hmm.
just it's new. It's new technology and gets a lot of people interested, and it is very powerful. But
Hmm.
for certain things, for getting ideas and for
Yeah.
helping you with small tasks and things like that. But so kind of so switching gears here, what would you say to the remodeler that might be going through, or not going through, but stuck on at a plateau, or they're wanting to break through to the next level? Maybe they're stuck at a certain
Hmm.
price point, or like you said, they're stuck in putting out fires every day rather than
Hmm.
actually taking a step back and growing the business. What would you, just some general nuggets of wisdom and information that you could give people like that?
Hmm. First thing I'm going to tell you is like, you can't do it alone. And I definitely fell into this a lot throughout my career, where you just feel like you can do, like, I can't trust anybody to do this because I understand how it works and I want the result that I want. I want it done the way I want it done. I hear these words a lot as well, right? We're known for high quality, but that's because I'm directly involved in a project, sort of thing. And I think the challenge is in that sort of like, you know, I guess catch 22 is that it's really hard. You'll outscale yourself at a certain point, right? Like you'll hit that glass ceiling. There are a bunch of pivot points in a business. Getting to 1 million is usually the first sort of like milestone for companies. Between 1 and 1.5, it's painful because you're starting to get to a scale, depending on the size of jobs that you're doing, that like there's just too much volume and I need help, sort of thing. And so the second point I would tell you is don't be afraid to spend in your overhead. And this is something that we see, a lot of people wear as a badge of honor, that I'm lean and mean. We don't have a very large overhead. I work out of my house. My personal truck is my business truck and all of that. That's great. But at the end of the day, and in the marketing lens, I think the other badge of honor we say that might, you might like, is they say like we're all word of mouth. We don't like, and this is what I see every time I go to do an annual budget update with our clients. I look at their marketing category. I'm like, you're not spending anything in here, and like you can't just rely on word of mouth because it's not a predictable pipeline for your business. And so that's
Mhm.
just a little sidebar that I thought you'd enjoy. But Yeah, don't be afraid to spend in your overhead. You're going to need it. So you're going to need to spend on marketing. You're going to need to spend on administrative help, because without that, you simply can't do anymore. The next thing I'd say is, in keeping with that, stop doing the data entry. So like, you get somebody to help you do the data entry, set up upstream solutions for everything that you're doing. Dedicate a portion of your week, even if it's 1 hour. Like, surely if you work 60 hours a week, you can survive on 59, and take 1 hour to work on something that's a real pain point, right? So maybe your invoicing process is really clunky. Take an hour every single week, because at the end of a month, that's 4 hours that you put towards that, right? And it might seem like nothing, but it might be all you need to help improve that system. And what I always tell business owners, especially at the start, is the first thing we need to do is free up some of your time. So these are some of the strategies that you do. Spend in your overhead, get some additional help, look upstream in your solutions, and try to understand what's happening and what the effect is downstream, and how I could change that upstream, right back to the kind of the beginning of our conversation, which I think is so critical. The other thing I'll tell you is that, depending on where you are in the country, the type of work that you do, type of work you're comfortable doing, and I'd say the overall direction of where you want to grow your business, there is this free money concept. The larger the project, the more free money there is there. Meaning, if I have a $250,000 project and a $500,000 project, one is not half or double the work of the other. So a $500,000 project might take me 5 months to perform, whereas the 250 could take me 3 to 3.5 months, or maybe even 4 months, depending on it. A lot of factors: client, type of work, complexity of the build, et cetera, et cetera. But the point being that, if you look at it from a straight dollars per day total revenue divided by the number of days on the plan, you'll see a value there. And that value can help you understand the free money concept and see. Now, you're not going to bill, let's just say, $2,000 every single day, but it's just a metric that helps you understand where you start to scale in a business, because there's just more dollars there. So if I want a $500,000 business and I want to grow to 1 million, I could take on 10 $50,000 projects to get me that other 500,000, or I could take one $500,000 project. And which one's going to be less work? Is going to be the $500,000 job. So that's another way that you can kind of look at scale. Now, not everybody wants to go there. Not everybody has the experience selling those or even performing those. So they might not feel confident to do that, and they may not want to go there, right? And I always press my business owners and say, is the not wanting to go there a bit of fear because you haven't done it and you don't have the confidence to do it, which is fine, and we'll work on that? Or is it that you just genuinely enjoy, I'm a deck and fence contractor, that's what I really enjoy, and I want to continue doing that? Great, perfect. As long as you know exactly what you want to do, then we'll work your pricing model to exist, or to give you what you want, sort of thing. And that's the last point, is just, again, coming back to the financial piece. You need to know what you need to charge to get you towards where you want to go. It's not just about like surviving for the year. It's about, like, you have to look outwards a little bit and say, like, where am I trying to go with my business? Because we're often really stuck in the now. And, one of my other marketing friends, and I always joke about this, it's like, most construction business owners are going to be in business for, let's say, 10, 20, 30, 40 years. But we're only ever looking 6 months ahead. And it's kind of ironic in that sense, because you don't really know where you're going. It's just like, I'm steering the ship in the ocean, but I actually don't know what the destination is, sort of thing. And I know it's, not a new sort of concept to think about, but that's kind of the reality when you're in that hamster wheel, when you're kind of firefighting on a daily basis. We're not really pointed towards where we're trying to go. And so that's something that, like, take some time. Could be driving, could be like in the shower. I do great thinking in the shower. Think about where you want your business to go and start developing a plan towards getting there. And that means challenging yourself on what you charge to produce enough dollars to spend in your overhead to help you grow towards that trajectory.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, that's great, man. I appreciate you just gave us a lot of good tips there, and I appreciate that, man. Is there anything else that you'd like to share with us today, or with our listeners? Just anything at all that you'd like to say before we close here?
Yeah, I think the last thing I would say to people is, like, I always have this line that, like, a business owner will show up for, to work on Monday for free, but your employees won't. And I think one of the biggest challenges, especially from like a carpenter turned construction business owner, remodeler, whatever discipline you're in, I think there's a mindset piece that has to change here for a lot of the people, at least, that come into our program. And that's the first thing I really work on, is seeing your business as an actual business, as opposed to I'm worth $35 an hour, on an hourly wage sort of thing. And I think that's kind of like the real challenge. Whether you come to someone like me, you go to, like any other sort of association, like be it NARI, NAHB, whatever, it doesn't really matter. Get the business knowledge that you need if you're lacking it. And there's nothing wrong with lacking it because no one ever taught it to you, right? I never got taught it. Hundreds, if not thousands, maybe more, don't get taught it every single year. There's nothing wrong with that, but go get the business education you need to understand your business so that you understand your value. Because I think the chances are the majority of people listening to this do undervalue themselves on a daily basis without maybe even being conscious of it. And so I think for me, it's really something that really sticks out from a mindset perspective that I started to realize in those first couple of years. That's really what's going on here, is that people don't value themselves enough. They'll show up and work for free. They'll eat costs just to keep a client happy without actually respecting themselves in their business, and respecting their business. And those are some lines that I tend to say to people in a few of my videos, but also just generally in our one-on-one coaching, is that you have to actually pay yourself enough, which is respecting yourself and your business. And then you're respecting your business is charging enough that it can cover that.
Right. Well, great, man. I really appreciate you taking the time to come here and share some of your insights. And it's been great, man. I really appreciate you. And it's been a great conversation.
Yeah, my pleasure.
All right. Well, thank you again for watching and listening over Spotify, Apple Podcast, YouTube, wherever you're listening from. And we will see you in the next episode of the Remodeling Success podcast. Thank you very much. And we'll see you next time.